apparently had a large effect on Ronald Reagan. And I was in email correspondence with that director a year ago. And, you know, I was telling him technical things, you know, like this modernization costs. And man, I was trying to encourage him to come out, you know, with a sequel to The Day After that captured the rising global threat, you know. It's no longer just the bipolar nuclear arms race.
It would also bring
And he was into it. He was really into it. I'm forgetting his name right now. He couldn't find the financing for it.
I think
And
that's
what a
different
shame.
today. I think that's different
Yeah.
today.
Well, I don't know. What a shame that we can't have a sequel to The Day After. I think there was somebody in back, or you in back?
Well, just to address the filmmaking, I personally brought it up in Sicily this summer at the Taormina Film Festival to Oliver Stone. And he actually had a film that he premiered there on July 4th, and it ended with an A-bomb going off in Ukraine. At that time, they didn't want to discuss it because the film hadn't been screened. And I direct the Taos Environmental Film Festival, so this year, as a result of it being the 75th anniversary of the invention of the atomic bomb, 45 miles away, I'm going to be screening The Man Who Saved the World and ICAN, the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. The 2017 Nobel Peace Prize winners have just completed a film in 2019, which I'll be screening as well. And so The Man Who Saved the World is a story that everyone should know about, and no one knows.
Yeah.
And I think that that is important because no one addresses the fact that the accidents, I feel that we're living on borrowed time. And in 1963 in the nuke sub, that one was critically close. And then again in September 26, 1983 in Russia, which that film is about. And I just can't say enough for the importance of filmmaking, and that's what I said to Oliver Stone is why, in a public forum in Taormina, why aren't filmmakers doing that right now? I actually consider climate change to be an existential crisis, but I agree with what you're saying, that the nuclear card is the thing that's no one's talking about, and it takes one accident, and we're toast.
You know, she mentioned this movie, The Man Who Saved the World, and it's about a Russian colonel who was in strategic forces. He was in command, and Russian radar showed a bunch of incoming missiles, and he sensed that something was wrong. And he waited a little bit longer. He waited to notify, it was Boris Yeltsin at the time, that was the Russian prime minister or whatever, and a well-known drunkard. but he didn't. He used his own gut instincts and did not order a retaliatory nuclear strike on the U.S. in what turned out to be a malfunction within Russian radar. There's another Russian that saved the world during the blockade of Cuba, during the U.S. naval blockade of Cuba during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So this would have been 1962.
That's the sub that I was speaking of.
Yeah, the
the
sub.
2 men and one
Right.
refused to.
Right. So a U.S. destroyer was depth charging a Russian sub, and it took 3 offs, and the sub was nuclear armed with a torpedo, I believe it was, and it took 3 officers in Union, 2, okay, to make the decision to launch, and 1 guy held out. So twice Russians have saved our ass, you know. Now, you mentioned the 75th anniversaries. First of all, on July the 16th is the 75th anniversary of the Trinity test, which irradiated the Tularosa Basin, and those people have never been compensated. Then August 6th is 75th anniversary of Hiroshima. The 9th is Nagasaki. Now, towards that end, my organization and others are working towards big events in Los Alamos. And, for example, the actor Martin Sheen is pledged to come, just for starters. You mentioned ICANN, which is the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. And they were the Nobel Peace Prize recipients, 2017. We asked their CEO, Beatrice Finn, to come for their events, for the events that we're doing. She said she can't because she's going to Hiroshima. So that is actually the ideal place. But we got the guy who's kind of, they don't have much of a hierarchy, but nevertheless, you might describe this guy as second in command of ICANN, is coming to these events on August 6th and August 9th. There'll be more noise about it. Some of you may know Father John Deere.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He's there all the time.
Yeah, well, I had a 3-hour meeting with him on Saturday, and me and others, with respect to these anniversary events that we're going to do. Should be a big deal, and we're hoping, of course, for lots of warm bodies. Numbers matter in this kind of thing.
Well, I hope that you will some way participate in my film festival, which it begins on Earth Day. And my dream is to have a Skype between Gorbachev and the Pope, because they both recently came out for the abolition of nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And so if anyone out there happens to have some kind of connection to them, I mean, Santa Fe is named after St. Francis, and you never know, a dream can come true.
Listen, I'm going to leave cards here, so give me
Thank
an
you.
invitation.
Anjanette, how are we doing on time?
We got about 10 minutes, dude. Yeah.
Really? Damn, we had fun.
We can-
That went
yeah.
by quick.
Eric, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I was just wondering, and I'd be real interested to hear your take, and, you touched on it a little bit with what's happening in August 9th and so on, and I know that you've been somewhat successful in getting the EIS at the Savannah River plant, and to me, that's the heart of it, because we never are allowed to have the discussion, does nuclear weapons, does it serve a purpose, A, and B, the environmental impact statement requires, if you can articulate a purpose, are there reasonable alternatives that don't have this impact? And we have never been allowed to have that discussion. Is there an alternative to whatever you think nuclear weapons do as a deterrent or whatever? Is there another way to address that issue without making all this toxic waste? I mean, to me, that's a discussion, and I'd be interested in knowing what you think is effective.
I can add a little bit, and I am litigious. I think I've sued, and I don't mean me all by myself, but I think I've been involved in 8 lawsuits against the Department of Energy. Lost one just on a capricious ruling from the bench. And, if we had the money, we would have appealed it. But anyway, my underlying point is I'm litigious. And sometimes I think lawsuits are the only thing the feds really listen to. Now, towards that end, under the National Environmental Policy Act, there was a programmatic environmental impact statement in 1996 that formally relocated plutonium pit production to Los Alamos from the Rocky Flats plant. But I hasten to point out that, of course, it was Los Alamos that was the original site of pit production. But anyway, there's this programmatic environmental impact statement, 1998. It limited pit production at that time, this is explicit, to 20 pits per year. They now propose 80 pits per year at 2 different locations. So me and others, including the National Natural Resources Defense Council, we maintain that another programmatic environmental impact statement is required. The National Nuclear Security Administration just last Wednesday went no. And to conclude, I believe that there's going to be citizen litigation over this matter. So stay tuned for that. As you can probably imagine, it's not easy suing the feds. They have basically an unlimited war chest, legal war chest. It's the taxpayer that funds them. Boy, they're lawyers, they just eat up that money. But I already did state, you know, intentionally, we've been successful in the past. And again, I anticipate citizen litigation on the matter that will need public support.
All right.
On that happy note.
On that happy note. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Thank
Most
you.
welcome.